Well, hello and welcome to the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy. So our podcast today will be Integrative and Functional Women's Health with Dr. Julianne Arena. Before we begin our conversation, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Bay Coast Bank. Bay Coast Bank is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. As always, you can support the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy by subscribing to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please remember to leave a review, and of course, 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated.
So welcome, Dr. Arena. Dr. Julianne Arena is a double board-certified physician, educator, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and mother of 2 teenagers. She received her undergraduate degree at Harvard University and graduated from Boston School of Medicine. She completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, Mass. She then practiced conventional medicine as a board-certified OB/GYN physician for 15 years before she had her own awakening. In May of 2016, she went to a conference on integrative medicine and women's health. She could not believe there was so much out there that she hadn't learned in conventional medical training to help her patients, her family, and herself. Her passion for healing was reignited, and there was no turning back. She went on to complete a fellowship and board certification in anti-aging, regenerative, metabolic, and functional medicine. She feels she has the privilege of having both a traditional and an integrative perspective on healthcare. Her expertise in balancing hormones with a whole lifestyle approach, including bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, BHRT, has allowed countless women to get their lives back. That is what truly drives her and brings her joy. It is her goal to help women create an optimal and vibrant life. So one of those statements really piqued my curiosity. Before you had your own awakening, I'm very curious to know about this.
So I thought I was living my dream life. I was practicing OB/GYN in a very successful practice. I was delivering babies, performing surgery, and taking care of women in all phases of their life. And then this awakening happened in 2016 when I went to this conference. I couldn't believe that there was so much more out there to help my patients, to help my sister, to help my mother, to help myself. In traditional medical school, we're taught all about what are the symptoms, here's the diagnosis, here's your treatment or your medication for your ill, right? And in this conference, they talked about the whole body and how all of our body systems interact. And that's just not how we're conventionally trained. You know, we're trained a little bit in silos. And so I had this aha moment that, you know, a lot of things start in our gut and digestion and food matters and learning so much more about the thyroid than the small amount that I learned in medical school or residency training. And so I would go back to my hotel room each night of this conference and say to my colleague, we have to bring this. We have to bring this to our practice. We need more tools in the toolbox, right? So I went back to my practice and my partners. You know, at those partner meetings, that big mahogany table. And I was like, guys, we need to grow another branch of the tree. Yes, we have conventional medicine. It saves lives. But we need to grow another branch and really get to root cause. Look at, you know, the whole body and talk about lifestyle and talk about sleep and talk about stress and talk about foods and digestion, the things that we don't really have time to talk for, but that can be game changers. And when I sat in front of my partners and I talked about this, they kind of looked at me like, what?
I was wondering if they'd be open to that.
You know, a lot of questions, right? What is integrative medicine? What is functional medicine, right? And then, well, we don't know what to do with these people when they call at 2 a.m. And I said, they're not going to call at 2 a.m., right? And I really wanted to grow that part of the practice. And I really struggled with that because if you're not on, you know, if we're not all on the same page. And I really tried to bring that medicine to our practice. And I went back, as you mentioned, and I got all of the training. And I tried to do that in the traditional medical model. But as you know, we are tasked with seeing 30 patients a day, double booked every 15 minutes. And you can't really take that deeper dive.
Right.
It's not there. So I will always remember this one patient. We'll call her Susie. And Susie came to see me, and we were talking for a period of time. And I said, Susie, I want to take a deeper dive with you. She was struggling with weight, struggling with hormones. And I said, okay, we need to talk. We need to talk about your sleep. We need to talk about your digestion and your bowels and all those sorts of things. But the clock is ticking. And I said, but we don't have time today. So come back, make another appointment. And Susie came back. And she said to me, you know what, Dr. Arena? After that first visit, I went into the parking lot and I went into my car and I cried. Because you were the first doctor that ever really asked me those questions. So I knew then and there that I needed to do something different. And so part of that aha moment is that at my next partner meeting at that big mahogany table, I went in and I handed in my letter of resignation. After 15 years thinking that was going to be my forever home. And that was challenging because I was the primary breadwinner for my family. And I handed in that resignation without a place to go, but I knew in my heart that I needed to practice medicine differently.
What a brave move, and what a strong conviction and a passion, obviously, that came. Oh my gosh. So then how did you do that? And how did you set up your next practice to make sure you included all that?
Sure. Well, I knew I wasn't yet ready to be on my own.
Yeah.
That I still needed to get my feet wet. And so I was very fortunate to join a practice that was already in place, an integrative practice. Was the Rothfeld Center for Integrative Medicine. Glenn Rothfeld, really a fore-founder in integrative and functional medicine. So I was allowed to be mentored by him and work there. But then in November of 2019, he said he was closing the office site where I was working.
Oh, no.
Right? So right in the middle of going through a divorce and a lot of other personal things happening on my plate. And I thought to myself, okay, I can go back. I have the skills to go back into conventional OBGYN. Or this could be the universe telling me it's time for me to go out on my own. And so with a colleague of mine, in an 8-week period before the door shut down, I don't really know how I did it, but I created this practice that I have now, Waves of Awakening.
Nice.
And we opened our doors February of 2020, 2 weeks before the world shut down.
Right.
But we navigated telehealth very quickly, as we all did.
Oh my God.
And we're able to do that.
Well, I guess that means you're adaptive and flexible. Oh my word.
Yes.
It's kind of like a whirlwind.
Yeah.
So where is your practice? I'm curious.
It's in Plymouth, North Plymouth.
Plymouth, okay. And I have to ask, how did Susie do?
Susie is fabulous. Susie came back. We worked on a lifestyle approach. We talked about her sleep. We worked on food and nutrition in her gut. She is sleeping. Her hormones are balanced, and Susie's living her life.
Okay, great.
So what is it like? I'll speak from a personal standpoint. I'm used to traditional medicine.
Sure.
I go in and I know what to expect, and I know I have a certain amount of time, and I kind of prioritize in my head, the top 3 things because I don't want a doctor to go over is 15 minutes and, and all this stuff. And
Sure.
so it's a very different feel, I would imagine. So
Yes.
when someone calls you and says, hey, I'd like to come in and kind of explore this, what happens?
Sure. I do a lot of pre-education because I want to make sure that it's a good fit for them as well as me and my team. And so there's a pre-education process. I have a little video that says, this is what we do. We think a little bit outside of the traditional medical model. We want to get deep into your health goals. And then I have a 4-page form.
Oh, wow.
If someone is going to come in for an initial consult, it's a full hour.
Yeah.
And that full page 4-page form is really, what are your health concerns? How is it affecting your quality of life? What your goals are? And, what have you tried or haven't tried in the past? And when that person comes in, we sit down and we really go over that. But I also ask that person a lot of questions to see if they're ready to do what they need to do to get to their goals. Because, right, people are crazy, 50,000 balls in the air. And if you're not ready to do what it takes, you will just get frustrated. It won't be a good fit. So we don't always find that we go down that journey together
Right.
if someone's not ready.
And is this covered by insurance, or is this something that they're paying out of pocket for?
Paying out of pocket. When I opened my doors, I have a really big heart, and I wanted everything to be covered. And we actually opened it up to more insurance companies than I had in the previous practice, the previous integrated practice. And it just didn't work with regards to reimbursement, because the reality was they want me to see 30 patients a day every 15 minutes.
Right.
And my initial visits are an hour, and then my follow-ups are half an hour to 45 minutes. So we slowly weaned away from insurance, and then went, completely away. But we tried to build programs and memberships that allowed for value within the practice. So we have other things that we do in the practice. We have IV therapy, and there's other procedures that I do. And so there's some other benefits to what we have in our practice. So we did step away from the insurance model. Again, we need it, right? But it's really for emergency care. We don't do so well with coverage for preventative care.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's very hard in conventional medicine to, I think there's a lot of physicians should be interested in spending more time with their patients.
Right.
It's just, you're stuck with this
Yes.
compensation model that we all struggle and suffer with, unfortunately. So it's great that you've been able to break away from that and do what you're doing. I didn't think it'd be possible with the conventional reimbursement model as it is.
No, I really tried. But, when the plumber is getting more,
Yeah.
reimbursement than I am for the time that I'm spending, I thought, okay, there's got to be a different way to do
Right.
this.
Right.
So, does someone who signs up with you to become your patient, do they still see an OBGYN separately, or are you?
Great question. Because we're outside of the insurance model, and I say, if you have a gynecologist and you love them, stay with them. They don't have as many tools in the toolbox, so they may be seeing them for their GYN, or, and if they're seeing me for hormone balancing. But I do have a following for the 20 years that I've been in this, and people will follow me. And so I do gynecology for those, and then people who want me to take it over. The challenge is, if we're working on something that's out of the wheelhouse of a traditional doctor, they get a little nervous. They say,
Right.
well, I don't really know what's going on, and that might be risky. And then they put ideas in the patient's head. And I said, okay, then let me take that over for you so that there's a trust in there,
Right.
and we're all on the same page.
So now, what would drive a woman to see you? Like, what types of complaints would they be experiencing?
I see the gamut. I see teens up to the menopausal population. However, my biggest drive, I think, is women from their 30s to 50s who just aren't feeling well anymore, right? I call it sort of the superwoman syndrome, is we're so used to going, and then things start to change. I talk about something called the hormone symphony. Your hormone symphony starts to sound like a garage band. And we're not feeling well. We can't push like we used to, and there's frustration. So that's a big part of my practice.
And you don't see postmenopausal women, it sounds like you're...
I do.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially word of mouth, too, has really opened that up. So I see a lot of postmenopausal
Okay,
women
all
as
right.
well.
I misunderstood that. Okay, great.
So then, what are you identifying as like the pillars of health, like the categories that you really want to dive into?
Sure. We have to talk about food and nutrition. And again, I don't know how much training you had in traditional medical school with food and nutrition. I don't remember it really, but food really matters.
Yeah.
And
There wasn't much, really.
right? Right? And so food does matter, right? Especially in this day and age. So we talk about food as medicine or food as poison. And there's obviously, better choices out there than not. And less processed and maybe more plant-based. Again, we could have a whole podcast on that, but food matters. So nutrition, I always start with that. I talk about needing to move your body in some way, shape, or form. But if people aren't feeling well, they don't want to move their body.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean being on the elliptical for 45 minutes.
Right.
It may be going out for a walk, so finding something that works for people.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I talk about nutrients and hormones. We age because our nutrients and hormones decline, and oftentimes we're told we're just getting older. This is what to expect. And that's sort of a little pet peeve of mine because, okay, well, what's low? I talk about where are the cracks and holes in the foundation. Let's support that so that you can feel well.
Right.
Yeah. And another huge pillar for me is sleep.
Yes.
And sleep hygiene is what I call it, because we get rewarded in this society for minimal sleep, right? Oh, I got 5 hours and I can still go about my day.
Right.
Well, sleep, as you know, is when we rest, we digest, we heal. The bad cells go out, the good cells come in, and we're not good at it. And if we talk about sleep hygiene, we need to get at least 7 to 9 hours, right? The 5 to 6 that we push through, not great. But also how we set the stage for sleep, because we really need to set our brains up for quiet time. I always tell people, think about how you put your babies down when they were little. The room was dark. We gave them a bath.
That's great.
We rubbed their back. We put on music to quiet their brains. What do? Maybe we're running around doing the laundry because it's the only time of day. Maybe we had a glass of wine. Maybe we're binge watching Netflix because we think we're tuning out, but we're not really letting our brain quiet, or we're scrolling on our phone. So all of those things don't allow our brains to quiet. So I talk about trying to retrain ourselves to have better sleep hygiene.
I know. Sometimes I'm lying in bed and it's like, I wish my brain was just like a microchip that I could take out.
Right.
And just like put it on the bedside table, because it just seems like it never stops. Honest, it does. I know you're looking at me like, really?
No, but sleep hygiene is really important. I talk to patients about that all the time, but it's so hard to get patients to buy into that sometimes. They want a pill. Give me Ambien, give me Xanax, give me lorazepam, whatever. And those things really, as we know, they work for a very brief period of time, and then you need more and more, and then they just don't work.
Right.
And they're habit forming. So that's great. I'm glad that you support that, because I'm a big advocate of sleep hygiene, good sleep hygiene.
Yes.
So maybe you can just tell our audience the things that you tell patients in regards to sleep hygiene.
Sleep?
Yeah.
Well, I talk about setting that stage, right? And people, the Ambiens, the Lunestas, all of those things. I try a more natural approach. My favorite nutrient is magnesium. I love magnesium because it's involved in over 300 enzyme reactions in our body, and it gets chewed up with stress.
Yep.
So oftentimes I tell people magnesium at bedtime calms the brain, calms the muscles. If we're having bowel issues, calms the bowels
Take
too.
it every day.
I know. 2 capsules at bedtime for me, yes.
Yeah.
So is that like a separate supplement, or is that like if you take a multivite, are you done with magnesium?
Probably not getting enough.
Probably not getting enough.
Oh.
Right. And so I always tell people, sometime I'm going to make a T-shirt that says, "Don't fear the mag." And I say, because I have so many people who don't have regular bowel movements. So there's different forms of magnesium. And so I say, go up until your bowels are loose and then back it down. And we're not robots, so your needs are going to change from time to time. But yeah, magnesium is
So how
my
much
favorite.
magnesium do you find your patients generally take?
Everybody's different, and most capsules are, 125, 150 milligrams. There's some brands out there that are 300 milligrams in one capsule, and I love that because maybe it's just one. But if we're stressed, sometimes it's 2. Sometimes it's 3, depending on what your needs
I
are.
do about 400 milligrams a
Yeah.
day, and that seems to be adequate.
Yeah, I do anywhere from 300 to 600, depending on my life and my stressors.
Right.
Yeah.
How can we tell if an over-the-counter supplement we're taking is a good one? Like, 'cause I imagine there's some differences
That's a
between
great
them.
question. They're not all created equally.
No.
And they've done studies where they've pulled nutrients and supplements from, Target, Walmart, even Vitamin Shop and all
Right.
of that. And they don't necessarily have what they say they have in them, or there's a lot of fillers. So I am a little bit of a stickler about nutrients and supplements because you want to know that they're third-party tested, where they're stored, that they have in them what they say they have in them, and there aren't necessarily fillers, that they're gluten-free and dairy-free and soy-free. And I always tell people, I love Target and I love Amazon, but I wouldn't necessarily get my nutrients from there, just because I want to know where they're coming from.
Right.
And yes, are they going to be a little bit more expensive, but the quality is worth it. You know what you're getting.
Do you ever have to justify ordering the lab values? Like if I'm asking because I went to my primary the other day and I'm like, hey, can you do a vitamin D level on me?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, let me see if you qualify
Right,
for one.
you
I
have
was
to have
like,
a diagnosis or it doesn't get covered
I
sometimes.
hate that.
It's really
And
a
that's
pain.
fairly new,
Yeah.
right? Maybe in the last 3 or 5
Yeah.
years, I've found that it's not being covered.
They've actually really cracked down on vitamin D levels, bizarrely. It's hard to get them covered sometimes. If someone has obviously osteopenia or osteoporosis
Right.
or whatnot, you can do it. But I get that question all the time, and I have to search for a diagnosis.
Well, and I talk about that too. Vitamin D, it has a huge normal range,
Right.
30 to 100. So you're floating around the the high 20s, low 30s. Okay, your normal range. But what the research shows optimal is still in normal range, but maybe 50s to 80s. That's where we see decreased risk, breast cancer, colon cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and now COVID, right? People who
Right.
have higher or more optimal levels of D do better with COVID. So, and it's just a vitamin,
Right.
right? So, yeah, I'm a big fan. And again, sunlight, wonderful, but we all put on our sunscreen, so we're not getting optimal levels when we go out.
There is a big belief about the whole, COVID issue with vitamin D. It's interesting. This is all anecdotal, but if you look at, our nursing home patients got wiped out, and of course they were older with a lot of comorbidities, but they were all vitamin D deficient too,
Right.
which is interesting, because they don't have sun exposure. They're inside a
Right.
building 365 days of the year, and some of them are on vitamin D supplementation, but generally it's not enough.
Right.
They're given 1,000, units a day or so, and often you need a lot more than that. So
Yeah, sometimes I'm depending on someone's level. And again, I test, I don't guess. What's your level? Sometimes someone be, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 IUs, but not forever. Let's
Right.
get you into an optimal range and back you down. And sometimes what's in your multi might be okay if you're already optimal.
Yeah.
Chances winter in New England, probably not, but
right. So good sleep hygiene, basically, limiting alcohol,
yes.
caffeine,
Yes.
limiting screen time. Don't watch TV in bed. Have a quiet environment, and then there's natural supplements like magnesium that are helpful too. And I also think trying to stay away from the prescription meds as best you can.
Yes.
Can I ask one more question on sleep hygiene? When you say to monitor your sleep hygiene, am I keeping a journal? Am I writing things down? Like, how am I tracking my sleep?
There are a lot of tracking devices out there, but again, if that's more stressful to you, there are Oura rings and, Apple Watches and all of that. I think you know your body best. If you wake up in the morning and you feel rested, great. If you're not, okay, what's going on? Then you could take a deeper dive. But even the tracking devices, I have an Oura ring, and it tells me what my sleep has done and my readiness for the day. And sometimes I don't agree with it because it says, take an easy day. And I said, no, this is my day to work out. I'm not going to pay attention to it. So you have to take it with a
Right.
grain
Yeah.
of salt.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Primacare is Southeastern New England's trusted leader in medical care. With offices in Fall River and surrounding communities, we're dedicated to your well-being. Our carefully selected team of more than 150 providers offers world-class primary and specialty medical care. Primacare doctors are supported by a skilled staff trained to deliver comprehensive radiology, imaging, and testing services. Primacare is large enough to take care of all your medical needs, but small enough to care for you personally. Primacare is by your side.
Can we circle back to nutrition now and some components and what you really focus on with nutrition when you take a deep dive with somebody?
Sure. I used to do a lot of food sensitivity testing.
Yep.
There's definitely some value in that, but it's not a perfect science. And I tell people it's not a Bible, right? It's a guide, sort of reflective of the last few months of what you've been doing, but people see something on a page and they remember it for 5 years. So what I've really tried to do is clean up what people are eating and sort of try to remove the most inflammatory foods. and that's different for everybody.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll take people through a food elimination of the top inflammatory foods. What are those? We kind of know what those are, right? The processed foods, but it's gluten, it's dairy, it's soy, it's alcohol, it's caffeine, it's sugar, corn, peanuts. And then people say, what in the
What's
world am
left
I
to
going to
eat?
eat,
Yeah.
right? You can't take away my wine, or I'm not getting rid of my coffee. And I say, we can eliminate anything for a short period of time if that helps you figure out what's going on and play detective, because your issues are different than mine or from yours. So we often go through a short-term food elimination. What am I eating? Right, fruits, vegetables, lean meat and protein. If someone's a vegetarian, they're getting their protein elsewhere. And sort of filling in the cracks and the holes in the foundation, removing those foods, playing detective, and then adding back. And that's one of my favorite things, is to find out in that period of time when people remove things, how much better they feel. Sometimes, right, their reflux has gone away. Or I've seen mood issues, right? I will always remember this one patient I had. She removed gluten and her panic attacks went away, right? There's a huge gut-brain connection, as you know. So I have so much joy finding out what people are figuring out on their own. And then it doesn't mean you can never eat that again, right? Go on vacation, do it, eat it, own it, pay the piper, but then on Monday how to get back on track. I think we live like, yep, I'm doing well, I'm good, but then we sort of clean it up and you get to this level of feeling well.
Right. Like sometimes you don't know how well you can feel.
Exactly.
I think that's amazing. I think that's one of the things we've learned by having so many specialists on our show. It's like, I may feel okay, but okay may be an 8 out of 10 where I could be a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, but it's so insidious as, you may feel worse because of poor diet or whatnot, but it's a very insidious thing, right? So
Yeah.
You don't even remember after a while what you should feel like.
I know.
And that's the
know.
problem. I mean, I have patients who have fast food literally every day, and I don't know how they survive. I have that, and I'm like, I feel crummy for a week. Like, I probably haven't had McDonald's or Burger King
I feel
in
like I have
10
to go
years.
to bed and take a nap.
But,
Right.
not to pick on McDonald's and Burger King, but I'll pick on them a little bit. But, it's like, how do people do that? How do they have that every day? I don't even know. But it makes a big difference, clearly.
How long do you have to keep something out of your system for you to detox, I guess?
I mean, everybody's different, because I definitely get someone, I took it out for a week or two and I didn't notice a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what else are you doing?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that the only thing you're doing? And you're still, you're eating somewhere else and still getting that.
Right.
I don't know if there's any definitive. I asked to remove it for about a month.
Okay.
A month, okay.
Because I feel like we can do anything. Yeah. And what I've also learned is we don't pull it all out on Monday morning, because that's not sustainable. So we do a slow removal of those foods.
That's nice.
And so
That makes
we can
sense.
figure out, right.
Because then people aren't like, oh, I messed up, or I forgot I wasn't supposed to eat that. And then it's like, done.
Right.
You can kind of still work it in and do a gradual.
How about probiotics? Are you a fan of probiotics?
I am. That was the aha at that conference in 2016. I was like, what's a probiotic? What is the microbiome? That we have billions and billions of bacteria that aren't human, that are bacterial. And absolutely. Is it for everyone? I think it depends on your gut, right? I tell people, probiotics are the fertilizer for the gut. So if you're fertilizing with food, fermented foods and really healthy food, maybe you don't need one. Most of us aren't. So a good probiotic can be helpful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the foods that are historically inflammatory? Like, I know you said the processed foods and all that stuff, but are there really bad guys of food?
I think, and everyone has their own opinion. I think gluten is a bad guy. It takes our bodies, it takes our bodies a lot to digest it. Can we do it? Yes. And, our gut is amazing, but it breaks down the cell wall when we're trying to do that. Does it repair itself? Our cell, every 3 to 5 days. But if we keep hitting it over time, we can get chronic inflammation. It's a lot easier now to be gluten-free than it was, say, 5-10 years ago. But what I always tell people is gluten-free doesn't, if something is packaged and said gluten-free, it doesn't always equal healthy.
Oh.
There's a lot of other things in there.
Right.
Yeah. So, gluten, Dairy can be very inflammatory for people, and I've learned that over the years. But think about the marketing. I know milk, it does a body.
Good.
Right. How do we know that? Because we were marketed for years.
Right.
Right. And it may be good for some, but not all. And in my experience, dairy can be really inflammatory. You don't know.
Well, how about
That's
the whole
why.
food pyramid? That's kind of messed up too.
Right.
Did they do a new food pyramid?
There have been several.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of remember there were some
revisions.
adaptations.
I'm not sure I know what
Yeah.
the latest
know.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think brownies were included in anything.
That's a bummer.
No, that's the base of the pyramid.
Right.
Oh, excellent. I thought that was Maslow, but that's
Gluten-free
okay.
brownies. They have to be gluten-free.
Gluten-free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gluten-free. So, yeah. So what do you
So
take
now-
for supplements, by the way?
I take, I'm post-gastric bypass,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I take the multivitamins, I take the B12. I did just ask to have a vitamin D level drawn, and I got that. Well, I don't know if you qualify. And I was like, what? No, I had
And
to
do you
qualify.
take them in the liquid form? All of your supplements because of the bypass? or-
chewable.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I used to take one brand, and then the ingredients changed, and I was asked to take another brand. So you always have to be careful that you know what that label is, I guess. But yeah, everything's chewable or sublingual.
Did you fight to get your vitamin D drawn?
I was able to qualify because of the gastric bypass that I had in 2011.
Yeah, that gives you a little leeway.
I know. I was like, oh, phew.
Yeah, so I'm taking vitamin D,
Yeah,
let's see, B12,
yeah.
Great.
C,
Yep.
probiotic,
Love it.
some cranberry
Yeah.
for vascular health. What else am I taking? Oh, magnesium. There's probably something else in there too.
I have a couple to add, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's just for me. I mean, everyone's different.
Everyone's
right?
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I would say if you eat a lot of fatty fish and walnuts and flax, great. If you don't, maybe a high quality omega-3 can be wonderfully anti-inflammatory. Great for the brain, for the heart.
Yeah.
In a liquid form, it's tough to get down. It doesn't taste the best.
I love salmon. I usually eat salmon like at least once a week, so
Right.
maybe I won't have to take that fish oil.
Walnuts are a great source. Flax, you can put flaxseed in your smoothie or sprinkle it on your breakfast.
But I do think that it does make a difference, some of these supplements. I mean, never really had bought into it till, I think when COVID started, I started taking vitamin D and zinc and C, and then I added a little of this and a little of that. And I noticed when I started taking the D, my back pain went away, which was really interesting. So, I did notice some improvement. So I just continued with it. I don't take zinc every day because I worry about the effects on, copper metabolism
Sure.
and all that. So,
Do you
but
think they'll ever be covered by a prescription? I'm just thinking of like costs. Sometimes for some people, all these vitamins are going to be cost prohibitive.
it is costly. I mean, I don't know if it'll ever be covered. I mean, most of this stuff probably will never be.
Right. It should be. I mean, I think a vitamin D, a 50,000
Yeah.
prescription is covered.
That's covered.
But you have to be really low, I think,
Yeah.
to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's covered.
Stay inside for 10 months before you draw your level, I guess.
There you go. So we talked about sleep hygiene. We've talked a little bit about nutrition. Let's talk about exercise, the other pillar you wanted to mention.
Yes. Like I mentioned, we have to move our bodies, right? But, I work with the couch potato to the crazy CrossFitters,
Yeah.
right? And figuring out what works for you with your life, with your schedule. But I don't always start with that pillar because, as I mentioned, if you're not feeling well, you don't want to move your body. But I will, when we work with nutrition with people and they start to feel better and they're less inflamed and their joints are better, then okay, maybe I can go out and go for a walk. Or maybe it's Tai Chi, or maybe it's yoga, something that's more restorative. Because the other end of the spectrum is if you have the crazy CrossFitter who's going all the time, that's not great for hormone balance either because your cortisol is going through the roof. And it's already going through the roof probably 24/7 because we live in this crazy
Yeah,
world.
it's a stressful world.
So finding that balance, and again, there's nothing wrong with high intensity exercise. It's wonderful. But I don't think we should take it to the extreme. Finding something that works for you. Having to move your body is huge. And the other pillar that sort of goes with nutrition is I talk about detoxification, right? Our bodies are amazing detox vehicles, but sometimes they don't work so well, right? We get congested. So detox is a huge buzzword, right? Could be the juice cleanse on the radio or, a tube up your bottom or something. I tell when I work with people, detoxification is what your body's doing on its own by eating clean. And we may give you nutrients and supplements that support the liver. Make sure you're pooping every day, because if you're not, you're just recirculating those toxins. When we detoxify, when our liver's working well, we feel better. Again, less pain, less inflamed, weight may come off. Okay, now I'm motivated to go out and take that walk.
Yeah, but I think that one of the key things you kind of, I think, suggested is for exercise, you don't have to do crazy amounts of exercise, right? Walking is fine. I tell my patients that all the time. Sometimes it's an impediment for them to exercise because they think they have to go to a gym and spend an hour there, and they just can't get to do it, and so they don't do anything.
Right.
Rather than just getting out and walking for a half hour.
And the gym can be intimidating.
It is intimidating for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Right. So getting out and walking or some sort of other group exercise outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can they do like 10-minute intervals? Like say they're at work and they have a little break, or do you have to do that 30 minutes every day?
I don't think there's a magic number. I know my primary care suggested, take a break, do some squats in the corner, just do, walk around the building, do something like that when you have a break, because we're busy, right? And it's so hard to carve out the time for that. Yeah.
So you had mentioned another phrase that was kind of interesting, a hormone symphony. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yes. So my passion is women's health and women's hormones. So the hormone symphony, what I mean by that is if you think about the symphony, the Boston Pops up on stage, there's the wind, there's the string, there's the percussion. They're all playing beautiful music together, right? So if we think about our hormones up on that stage, who's up there? It's estrogen, it's progesterone, it's testosterone. It's also glucose and insulin. So we have to talk about that gut when we're balancing hormones. It's our thyroid gland.
Yeah.
And it's cortisol, that stress hormone that comes from our adrenals. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, all of those players need to play well. So maybe in our 20s and 30s, they're all playing well. But the superhuman, the superman or the superwoman, that cortisol's going high. Yes, we're able to balance it.
Right.
Cortisol affects the thyroid, though. So what's going on with our thyroid? And then as we age, what's happening with glucose and insulin? And then for me, with women, perimenopausally, what's happening with estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone? So we can Band-Aid, and maybe you get your thyroid med and you feel good for a little bit, but then you don't again because we didn't address the other players in the symphony. So that's what I tell the people that I work with is we're going to look at all players to see if we can get you feeling better, knowing that perimenopausally hormones are shifting all the time.
Right.
And so I tell people we're trying to balance it so it's not the Six Flags roller coaster, it's the Storyland roller coaster, right? Because our hormones are still changing until we're menopausal or postmenopausal. When some of those are stable, we're doing the best we can with the symphony.
Is there any rule of thumb, like postmenopausal, as far as treatments go for hormones?
Well, it depends on what school of thought that you, the conventional medicine is getting better about supporting hormone replacement therapy. We all know it got a bad rap in 2002 with the Women's Health Initiative, but now we have 20 plus years of relooking at it and more studies. And I was at a conference recently in the fall where they said hormone replacement therapy should be standard of care. And I wanted to get up on the table and do a dance because I've been fighting for that. Again, there's really good information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of things on the internet that are scary for people. Sure. And if providers are not going back and doing, the research because they don't have the time and it's not in their wheelhouse, then they're not being able to educate their patients that way. So I really try to educate. To answer your question, I think there's no magic number. In the conventional medical model, they say supporting hormones within the first 10 years of menopause, there's definitely cardiovascular benefit. Okay. So then they say, don't start it after that. Well, I think everybody's different. Right. You need to test and see where people are. What is their personal history, their family history? Are they a candidate or are they not?
Right. You know what I like about this whole conversation is it's not like segmented care. Like you just tie all the links together. Like, it's like that whole picture, and it's nice because sometimes like I feel like, okay, I'm going here to take care of this, check. I'm going here to take care of this, check. And it's just like it's very refreshing to me that this service exists, and it's like someone's just like that umbrella, like taking care of all the little bits and pieces that play into everything. And it's really diving to the root cause. It's not, here's a Band-Aid for today. Tomorrow you might need a different Band-Aid.
Well, and people will come into the office with their binder or their folder. And I love it. Show me what's happened.
Right.
So, so I
Right.
don't necessarily have to do all of these things. And so I was here for this and here for that. And this is what I've had done. And I will always respectfully, well, what's the plan?
Right.
And sometimes there isn't a plan, or I'm just going to be on this and I'm going to stay on it for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I said, well, how do you feel about that? Do you want to try to
Exactly.
do something different? And sometimes people say, no, I'm good. Okay. Then we won't go down that road.
And people don't have to feel bad to see you. Like they just want to feel better. Right.
No, I definitely have a large healthy population that just wants to optimize. Okay, I don't want to be told I'm just getting older. What
Right.
can I do? Let's see where I'm at. Yeah. Or, I have my marathoners and my, Pan Mass Challenge people that, okay, I'm working really hard. How do I
Right.
support that so I can continue to do it?
So I know we've spent a lot of time already on this podcast. We might not have the time, or we won't have the time to take a deep dive into women's sexual health. But can we just do like some broad strokes over women's sexual health and kind of like what you see and
Sure.
what's available?
Again, in traditional OBGYN training, we don't get a lot of training in that. We actually don't get a lot of training in perimenopause and menopause either. The main focus is the obstetrics and the GYN surgery.
Yeah.
And we love it, and that's great. But then you go out into the real world and you think, oh my gosh, I have these women who are done with their childbearing and don't need surgery that I
Right.
need to take care of.
Right.
So, and part of all of that is there's minimal training on sexual health. So, as I was going through my sort of aha, and then with COVID, you couldn't go to conferences. So I was listening to a lot online, and I was listening to a lot about female sexual health and wellness. And I thought, if, it's an uncomfortable conversation for people. If they can't talk to me as a gynecologist, who are they going to be able to talk to? So I sort of made it my mission, again, that, okay, I'm going to talk to everybody who walks through the door. Are you having any problems with intimacy? What's going on? And then realizing that there's no magic pill. Because for 15 years, I would go to conferences looking for the magic pill.
Right.
Not just for my patients, but for myself, for everybody, struggling. And then I thought, okay, it's way more complex than that, and it's multi-layered.
Right.
The number one, I would say, complaint is libido,
Yeah.
right? And probably pain, vaginal dryness as we age, or scarring from childbirth, something like that. And so it's really a multi-layered or multimodal approach. And I haven't yet, but yes, I'm probably going to write a book about it because I talk about it all the time, the experiences that women have and the different layers. And I can go over those layers now if you want to, or we can take a deeper dive at some other time.
I kind of like, again, to do the broad strokes. I know there's so much
I
here.
think we could probably have a whole other podcast.
Yeah, but I'd like to kind of talk about.
My multi-layered approach is number one is, how do I feel about myself, right? If I'm not feeling good in my skin, right, I don't feel like being intimate or sharing. The second one is, what is going on with my vagina, for all of those reasons we talked about. What is going on with my partner, if I have a partner or spouse? Do I like my partner or spouse in this moment in time?
Yep.
Because that's very complex. Did I sleep last night? Which goes back to the foundational sleep hygiene. What's on my to-do list?
Yeah.
And who's in the house? Because COVID brought everybody home, right?
Right.
Multi-generational
That's a really
families
good
and
point.
homes.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time looking at all of these layers, and everybody's different. Some people only might need help with a couple, and some we're starting from ground zero. And then there's different ways that unfold with each of those layers that I spend talking.
It's really nice because, again, I have a really good relationship with my primary caregivers, my PCP is a man. And I just never brought up this topic with him, and he never brought it up with me. And he's a great doc. I love him. But it was really funny because I'm pretty comfortable with these topics, but I just never thought it was something I would approach. And then I saw the NP in the practice instead of him one rotation. It was a totally different conversation with a woman, and nothing against the guys in the room. But
different dynamics.
It's a very different dynamic, and all of a sudden you open up yourself to, dive that a little deeper. It was nice.
Well, and I tell patients too, use me as an excuse when you go home. If it's tough to have those conversations even with your partner, right? So I say, go home and roll your eyes and say, all Dr. Arena was talking today about was sex. And are we having sex? And is there pain? And this and that. And maybe there will be a chuckle or a giggle, but it opens that door for that conversation with the partner, because that sometimes isn't even happening. Or I'll give them samples of some lubricant and be like, go home, put this on the table, and that will start a conversation.
What are we having for dinner?
Right.
Boom. Yes. So, Dr. Arena, I guess in closing, and again, thank you for agreeing to do a second podcast totally
Sure.
dedicated to women's sexual health with us.
Absolutely.
But one, what is your contact information? And two, what's the one message you want to leave our audience with?
Sure. Yes, my practice is called Waves of Awakening, Center for Personalized Medicine. We're in Plymouth. And so we have a website, wavesofawakening.com, and we're on Instagram and Facebook. Our office phone number is 774-404-7994. We're a small office. When you call, you'll get Michelle. She is lovely, and she can start that process to see if it's a good fit for us to work together.
Okay.
With regards to the one thing that I would say is we don't have a lot of control in what's going on in our lives, in our world today. But the one thing we do have control of is our health. And I would ask, if I were to show you something different, but you would need to put in the work, are you willing to do so?
Nice.
That's great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's
No,
it's a
thank you.
pleasure.
We really appreciate having you here and bringing your
Absolutely.
perspective. And we would definitely like to have you come back to talk about sexual health, because that could be a whole podcast, I'm sure.
Yes.
We can delve into the hormonal therapy a little bit more
Absolutely.
too, because that's another topic we just kind of scratched the surface on.
Sure.
So that would be wonderful. But I think this is a topic that's really helpful to a lot of our
hope
viewers
so.
out there.
Yes.
I
I
know
hope
it
it
will
opens
be.
the doors and there's more conversation that happens.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, thank you. We'll see you back soon, hopefully. And I want to, before we close, thank everyone for listening to our show. If you'd like to become a sponsor, please contact us at 774-319-4230. I want to thank Ron Gamache for our intro music and the PC Institute for producing our show. They do a great job. And, of course, Bay Coast Bank, our sponsor, which is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you again in another week or so.